If someone had told me that my life would change the day I signed a contract to marry a man I barely knew, I would have laughed in their face. I was never the type of woman to believe in fairy tales. My life was simple, built on logic, on plans, on the idea that I could create my own happiness without leaning on anyone else. But destiny has a way of sneaking up on you, twisting your story into something you never saw coming. My name is Clara, and this is how it all began. I still remember the first time Alexander looked at me with those sharp, commanding eyes. He wasn't just any man. He was powerful, influential, the kind of man people whispered about but never dared to cross. And when he offered me a marriage that sounded more like a business deal than a love story, I thought he was insane. His voice was calm and deliberate as he said, "Marry me. 1 year. In return, you'll have security, protection, and a life most only dream about." My heart slammed against my ribs as his words sank in. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss him, to walk away and never look back. And yet, something in the way he looked at me made me hesitate. There was strength in his gaze, yes, but also something else, something buried deep that I couldn't quite name. Against every piece of logic I clung to, I said yes. The first days were awkward, tense, like two strangers forced into the same room with chains binding them together. Alexander was cold, precise, and calculating, while I was spirited, stubborn, unwilling to bow to his control. He observed me constantly, as if I were a puzzle he was determined to solve. And yet, in between the silence and the sharp words we exchanged, there were moments that unsettled me. Moments when his hand brushed mine, and my breath caught before I could stop it. Moments when I caught him staring just a little too long, his expression unreadable, his eyes burning with something he refused to say out loud. One night at a grand dinner party, it became impossible to ignore. I was dressed in silk that didn't feel like it belonged to me, surrounded by women with diamonds around their necks and men who spoke with arrogance dripping from their lips. I heard the whispers. I saw the way some of them looked at me, like I didn't belong. One man smirked, mocking my presence, asking if Alexander had picked me out of pity. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Alexander's hand slid into mine under the table, strong and unyielding. His grip told me everything words could not. He leaned in, so close I could feel his breath tickle my skin as he whispered, "Let them wonder. You belong here because you are mine." I froze, every nerve in my body alive with fire. I told myself it was just for show, just part of the act we were both forced to play. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The way his voice curled around those words, the way his thumb grazed the back of my hand. It wasn't pretend. At least not entirely. From that night on, everything changed. The more time I spent with Alexander, the harder it became to keep my distance. I caught myself noticing the smallest things. The way his jaw clenched when he was lost in thought, the rare but devastating curve of his smile, the low timbre of his voice when he said my name. At night, when I was alone, I found myself wondering what it would be like if those accidental touches became intentional. If the tension that hummed between us finally broke into something real. But I was terrified. Terrified of what it would mean to surrender. Because falling for Alexander wasn't part of the plan. Falling for him meant handing over pieces of myself I had sworn I would never give away. And yet, no matter how hard I fought it, no matter how many walls I built, he was breaking through, piece by piece. That night, as we sat together in silence, his hand brushed mine again. Only this time, it wasn't an accident. His touch lingered, deliberate, confident, as if daring me to pull away. My breath stilled in my chest, and when I looked up, his eyes were locked on mine, intense, unyielding, burning with something neither of us dared to name. And in that moment, with my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the world around me, I realized with terrifying certainty. This man was starting to own pieces of my heart I never intended to give away. Love is never simple. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it, and once it takes root, it becomes impossible to ignore. I never planned to fall for Alexander. I never wanted to. But somewhere between the stolen glances, the silent protectiveness, and the unspoken words that lingered between us, I lost control of my heart. Our relationship began to shift. What once felt like a cold agreement started to resemble something dangerously close to affection. Alexander softened in ways I never thought possible. He would brush a strand of hair from my face, linger near me when there was no reason to, and stand by me in moments when I felt small. His presence filled every corner of my world, and despite my fears, I found myself drawn closer to him every day. There were nights when our silences spoke louder than any words. Times when I felt his eyes on me as if he were memorizing every detail of who I was. One evening, under the glow of candlelight, our walls finally began to crumble. His lips hovered close, and the air between us trembled with tension. When he kissed me for the first time, the world around us ceased to exist. His touch was fire and tenderness all at once, and I realized that somewhere along the way, I had stopped pretending. But love has a cruel way of testing its strength. Just as I was ready to believe in us, shadows crept in. Secrets whispered through the corridors of his empire. Documents surfaced that painted him as a man I could not trust. Forged papers, rumors of betrayal, and whispers that cut through the fragile happiness we had begun to build. I confronted him, my voice trembling with both fear and anger. He denied it all, his eyes pleading with me to believe him. But the weight of the evidence pressed against my heart until I could no longer breathe. Pain laced every word as I accused him of lying, of using me, of making me a fool. The argument left us shattered, our love suspended in a storm of doubt and silence. I walked away, carrying the heavy burden of heartbreak. My chest ached with every step, my mind torn between the man I loved and the man the world insisted he was. Nights were sleepless, haunted by the memory of his touch, the sound of his voice, the promise in his eyes. I told myself I was done, that I would never go back, but my heart refused to let go. And then, everything spiraled into darkness. It happened so suddenly. A hand over my mouth, shadows closing in, ropes binding my wrists. My world turned into fear and confusion as I was dragged away, trapped in a place I did not recognize. The cold air bit into my skin, and the silence was broken only by the echo of footsteps outside the locked door. I was no longer Clara, the woman who had begun to believe in love. I was a pawn in a game I did not understand, caught between forces I could not fight. My thoughts spun wildly, fear clawing at me, but one question thundered above all the rest. Would Alexander come for me? Or had I truly been nothing more than a contract, a convenience, a pawn he had already discarded? As the ropes burned into my skin and the darkness pressed in around me, I closed my eyes and whispered the question I was too afraid to know the answer to. And in that moment, with my heart breaking in the silence, I realized my fate was no longer in my hands. Sometimes love is proven not in words but in the fire someone is willing to walk through for you. I had lost all hope. The ropes cut into my wrists, the cold walls pressed against my skin, and fear wrapped itself around my chest like a vice. Every second that passed made me wonder if Alexander had already forgotten me, if our love had been nothing more than an illusion I had foolishly believed in. But love has a way of breaking through even the darkest prisons. I heard the chaos before I saw him. Shouts, heavy footsteps, the sound of fists colliding with flesh, and then the door burst open. And there he was. Alexander. His eyes wild, his face marked with rage and desperation, his body bruised but unyielding. He had come for me. Against every danger, against every enemy, he had fought his way to me. When his arms wrapped around me, the world finally felt safe again. I clung to him with everything I had, my tears soaking into his shirt as his voice trembled against my ear. He whispered, "You are mine, Clara. Not by contract, not by force, but because I cannot breathe without you." In that moment, every doubt, every fear, every whispered lie fell away. This was not a man bound by a deal. This was a man who had risked his life because losing me was unthinkable. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, sirens, and voices I could not focus on. My body was weak, but my heart burned with a new kind of strength. In the hospital, Alexander never left my side. He held my hand as though letting go would mean losing me forever. His cold mask had shattered, and what remained was a man stripped bare, raw with love and vulnerability. Days later, when I was strong enough to stand, he brought me to a place filled with faces I knew and many I did not. He stood before them all, his voice steady but filled with emotion, and declared his love for me. No longer in shadows, no longer hidden behind contracts or pride, but loud enough for the world to hear. And then, beneath the soft glow of lights and the gaze of those we cared for, Alexander asked me not for another agreement, but for forever. His words were simple yet powerful. He promised not wealth, not power, but love. A love fierce enough to fight for, gentle enough to heal, and enduring enough to outlast every storm. Our wedding was not a spectacle of diamonds and gold, but a celebration of survival, of trust rebuilt, of love reborn. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, my heart swelled with a joy I had never known. For the first time in my life, I was not afraid. I was exactly where I was meant to be. As I stood there, looking into the eyes of the man who had once been a stranger bound to me by paper, I realized that fate had given me something far greater than security or protection. It had given me love. Real, imperfect, undeniable love. And so my story ends not with the signing of a contract, but with a vow spoken from the heart. A vow to stand together, through fire and through light, forever. But now I ask you, if you were in my place, would you risk everything for a love that began as a lie? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves a good story, and subscribe so you never miss another journey into the heart.